How a 1-inch crack vaporized a 400-ton boiler. This is the forensic autopsy of the 10 deadliest crown sheet failures in heavy rail history. To pull a massive freight train over a mountain, a steam locomotive relies on a steel firebox holding back 300 pounds of explosive pressure. A thick wall of water protects the steel from the 2,500-degree fire. But machines do not just explode by accident. They explode because corporate accountants cut corners. When a dispatcher ignores a clogged water glass or a cracked staybolt to keep the freight moving, the physics completely change. The water level drops. The steel crown sheet softens. The crew tries to pump cold water back in. But the machine is already a bomb. The steel tears. The water flashes to steam, expanding 1,600 times its volume in a fraction of a second. How does a cheap maintenance shortcut defeat millions of pounds of iron? And what happens when corporate greed forces solid steel past its absolute breaking point? 300 pounds per square inch. That is the pressure inside a heavy rail boiler when it is working a grade. In SI units, that is 2.07 megapascals. That force is not abstract. It acts on every square inch of the crown sheet, the steel plate that separates the firebox inferno from the water bath above. On a 1-meter square crown, the upward force is 2.07 million newtons. That is 465,000 pounds trying to tear the plate off its staybolts every second the engine is in steam. The firebox does not just glow, it burns at 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit. The only thing keeping the crown sheet from softening and tearing is a thin film of water no more than a few millimeters thick. That film is the barrier. If it drops below 2 millimeters, the steel surface temperature rockets past 350 degrees Celsius in seconds. The yield strength of boiler steel, AISI 4340 and SA 516, collapses from 250 megapascals at room temperature to less than 100 megapascals at 550 degrees Celsius. The safety margin vanishes. The crown sheet is now a fuse. Heat flux at the water-metal interface runs at 1 megawatt per square meter. The steel is only 12 to 18 millimeters thick. At 300 pounds per square inch, the stress on a 15 millimeter plate is 138 megapascals, already 90% of the yield at 400 degrees Celsius. There is no cushion. Any local loss of water film caused by a clogged sight glass, a jammed injector, or a dispatcher ignoring a flagged defect pushes the stress past yield. The crown sheet enters plastic flow. It starts to deform, unseen, beneath the cab floor. This is not a margin for error. It is a margin for death. The instruments on the cab wall, the water glass, the pressure gauge, can lie. They can be fouled by scale, miscalibrated, or ignored. The numbers on the dial mean nothing if the water film is gone. When that happens, the machine is no longer a locomotive. It is a loaded weapon, waiting for a single crack or a single missed warning to trigger uncontained mechanical failure. Steel is not invincible. Every crown sheet, every staybolt, every inch of boilerplate has a breaking point. The numbers are not forgiving. At 300 pounds per square inch, the hydrostatic pressure is relentless, pushing upward on the crown sheet with a force that wants to tear steel from its moorings. A 15mm plate is already running at 138 megapascals, just shy of the yield limit at 400 degrees Celsius. There is no slack, no hidden reserve. The yield curve is a cliff, not a slope. Room temperature boiler steel might hold at 250 megapascals. Heat it to 550 degrees Celsius, and that limit collapses to under 100 megapascals. The margin is gone in a blink. If the water film thins to less than 2 millimeters, the crown sheet temperature surges. The steel stops behaving like a solid. It starts to flow. Plastic deformation sets in. The plate stretches under load, then fractures. Now the expansion factor comes into play. Water under pressure, suddenly exposed to firebox heat, flashes to steam. Volume increases by a factor of 1,600. The energy release is not gradual, it is instant. 500 megajoules of latent heat convert to kinetic force in half a millisecond. The boiler does not leak. It detonates. This is the margin math. There is no such thing as a safe crack, a tolerable defect, or a little bit of scale in the sight glass. The yield line is a hard wall. Cross it, and the machine becomes a weapon. Every corporate spreadsheet that defers a staybolt replacement or skips a hydro test is gambling with lives. The steel does not care about cost. It only obeys the laws of physics. Rank 10, Baltimore and Ohio, 1903. The water sight glass was packed with limestone scale. The crew trusted the glass. They ran the grade blind. The glass showed a safe water level, while the actual waterline sat 6 inches below the crown sheet. Nobody in the cab had a chance. The maintenance log flagged the sight glass for cleaning. Replacement ticket number 1903 OGL17 was deferred. The shop foreman signed off. The engine left the roundhouse with a known defect. 12 dead. The gauge lied. The steel obeyed physics. Rank 9. Pennsylvania Railroad, 1912. The cold water injector seized halfway up the horseshoe curve. Water feed rate dropped by 40%. The engineer pumped the lever, but the injector was jammed solid. The low water alarm failed. A mechanic's note dated May 12 said the injector had seized and recommended removal. It was ignored. The dispatcher's return to service order overrode the mechanic's warning. Ticket PRR12INV09. 15 dead. The crown sheet ran dry. The crew had no warning. The paperwork was clear, deferred for budget. Rank 8. Southern Pacific, 1917. The fusible plug was missing. The crown sheet overheated to 1600 degrees Fahrenheit. The steel's tensile yield limit collapsed. 21 dead. Post-mortem inspection found the plug slot filled with hard slag. The work order for plug replacement, SP17 FP03, was stamped deferred. The superintendent signed off. The crew never saw the warning. The steel failed on schedule. In each case, the warning device was compromised. The sight glass lied. The injector failed. The plug was missing. The crew operated with false data. The maintenance tickets were written, flagged, and ignored. The paperwork trails are not mysteries. They are confessions. Each deferred fix was a loaded chamber. Each ignored ticket a death sentence. The steel did not betray the crew. Management did. Rank 7. Great Northern, 1921. The staybolt threads were stripped bare. Shop records from the roundhouse note repeated hot-cold cycles. The steel expanded, contracted, and chewed the threads to ribbons. No one replaced the bolts. No one logged a torque test. The mechanic's margin note said threads worn, recommend replacement. It was stamped, filed, and forgotten. Under 250 pounds per square inch, the staybolts lost their grip. The crown sheet bowed. 18 dead. The ICC post-mortem found pitting corrosion along the bolt roots, with depth readings up to 3.2 millimeters. The last mechanical barrier failed, not from a single overload, but from years of silent fatigue and ignored paperwork. Rank 6. Chicago, Rock Island, and Pacific, 1924. The pressure gauge was out of calibration. The crew saw 220 pounds per square inch on the dial. Actual pressure was 290 pounds per square inch. The superintendent's inspection log flagged the gauge for immediate recalibration. The entry was initialed. The work order was never executed. The gauge remained in service, 24 dead. The metallurgical survey found the crown sheet had thinned to 11 millimeters at the center. Corrosive condensate, never flushed, ate through the steel. Ultrasonic surveys, required by the 1923 ICC directive, were skipped. The fusible plug was present but frozen in place by mineral scale. It could not melt, it could not vent. The sheet softened, stretched, and burst. In both cases, safety systems were not simply ignored, they were actively bypassed. The fusible plug, designed as the last warning, was either missing or immobilized. Staybolts and gauge calibrations, the backbone of boiler integrity, were left to rot. Shop notes and inspection logs tell the story in black and white. Maintenance deferred, warnings unheeded, lives traded for a few hours of service. The steel did not fail on its own. The paperwork did the job. The margin for error was erased by omission, corrosion, and corporate neglect. Steel remembers every degree. A crown sheet that once held firm at 250 megapascals turns to butter at 550 degrees Celsius. The microstructure changes, grains coarsen, perlite breaks down, the toughness drops like a stone. Lab reports show Vickers hardness falling from 110 at room temperature to 35 at 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit. That is not a margin, that is a death sentence signed in heat. Staybolts are the next to go. Each bolt is a 19mm shaft of medium carbon steel, torqued to hold back the hydrostatic load. The spec sheet claims 58 ksi at 70 degrees Fahrenheit. In the firebox, after years of thermal cycling, that number means nothing. Fatigue cracks form at the thread roots. Every pressure cycle is a hammer blow. Beach marks crawl across the fracture face, visible only under a stereo microscope. The bolt fails in silence. No alarm, no warning, just a faint click lost in the roar of the draft. Photographs from the lab show the story in sharp relief. A staybolt snapped at the shank, the grain torn open by repeated overload. The metallurgist's notes are blunt: thermal softening, fatigue striations, intergranular failure. The crown sheet above it is warped, the steel thinned to 11mm at the center. Ultrasonic scans reveal pitting from acidic condensate, each pit a stress riser waiting to finish the job. The numbers are clinical. Yield at 400 degrees Celsius is 150 megapascals. At 550 degrees Celsius, it is 90. The staybolts are supposed to share the load. When one goes, the rest take up the slack. The load doubles, then triples. It is a chain reaction. The sheet bows. The bolts snap in sequence. The rupture is not a surprise. It is a mathematical certainty. There is no such thing as a safe crack. A 1-inch fissure at the staybolt root is enough. The stress intensity factor calculated with the lab's numbers passes the critical threshold. Unstable crack growth begins. The steel yields, then tears. The water above flashes to steam. The expansion is instant. The boiler does not fail in slow motion. It vaporizes. The crew never stands a chance. Every autopsy reads the same: overheated steel, fatigued bolts, deferred maintenance. The paperwork always shows a flagged defect, a skipped test, a superintendent's initials on a deferred work order. The metal obeys physics. The management obeys the spreadsheet. The result is a crater where a locomotive used to be. The cab is a furnace. The engineer's hand hovers over the injector lever. He is reading the water glass, but the numbers are a guess. Scale coats the sight glass. The fireman shouts that she is dropping. He swings the injector feed. Cold water hammers the intake. Nothing. The injector sticks. The lever jams against the stop. The water line is invisible. The only sound is the hiss of superheated steam clawing at the steel. Crew log. Injector failed. Water not rising. Attempted restart. No effect. Crown hot. Seconds drag. The firebox glows white. The crown sheet, now exposed, spikes past 400 degrees Celsius. Tensile yield limit falls off a cliff. The steel is no longer a barrier. It is a fuse. The engineer grabs the blowdown valve. Too late. The water film is gone. Only a dry, glowing plate stands between 300 pounds per square inch and the firebox. Physics ignores panic. The mass of water above the crown sheet, 242 kilograms, sits at 180 degrees Celsius, pressurized, ready. The latent heat of vaporization is 2050 kilojoules per kilogram. That is 496 megajoules, locked in, waiting for a trigger. The crew has seconds. The steel has microseconds. The moment the plate cracks, the water flashes to steam. The expansion ratio is 1,600 to 1. The energy release is violent, total, and instant. Adiabatic flash. No time for heat loss. The pressure wave travels at the speed of sound in steam, 1,500 meters per second. The impulse is delivered in less than half a millisecond. The boiler shell, 400 tons of iron and steel, is now a bomb. There is no warning, no gradual failure, only a microsecond impulse. The energy is kinetic, not negotiable. The engineer's last act is a desperate pull on the injector lever. The fireman's final entry in the log is a scrawl: water gone, crown hot, pressure steady, awaiting relief. There is no relief. Human reaction time is measured in seconds. The physics of failure operates on a timeline of microseconds. The crew is out of the loop. The laws of thermodynamics are now in charge. A 1-inch crack is all it takes. The margin for error is measured in the thickness of a fingernail. The boiler crosses the threshold from machine to weapon in less than the blink of an eye. The paperwork, the warnings, the deferred repairs all vanish in the white flash of uncontained mechanical failure. A 1-inch crack at the staybolt root is not a defect. It is a firing pin. The instant it opens, the stress intensity factor at the crack tip jumps past the critical threshold. The steel does not yield, it tears. Hydrostatic pressure, 300 pounds per square inch, 2 million newtons, acts on the exposed crown sheet. The sheet inverts. The rupture front races across the firebox in milliseconds. Water above the breech flashes to superheated steam. Expansion ratio 1600 to 1. The shell cannot absorb the blast. 400 tons of boiler mass are hurled upward. The kinetic impulse is not theoretical, it is measured. The main shell clears the frame, launches, and travels 600 feet down the right-of-way. Debris scatters in a cone. The cab is vaporized. Crew quarters erased. The pressure wave shatters glass half a mile away. The timeline is precise. Crack propagation, microseconds. Water flash, less than half a millisecond. Boiler launch, complete in under a second. The laws of mechanics are not negotiable. The paperwork is irrelevant now. The machine is gone. Only the crater and the paperwork remain. The docket files are not ambiguous. Each explosion is mapped in black and white, from the first flagged defect to the final legal verdict. The roundhouse foreman's note, handwritten, dated, logged, calls out the cracked staybolt. The dispatcher's return to service order follows, time-stamped and initialed, overriding the mechanic's warning. The spreadsheet entry is clinical, status marked deferred, repair cost listed, next review date blank. The maintenance manager's signature sits beside the deferred flag. The chain is complete. NTSB docket 5508, Chesapeake and Ohio, 1955. The final report does not hedge. The report states, the accident resulted primarily from the railroad's willful neglect of required boiler safety procedures, as demonstrated by the deferred replacement of staybolt number 12. The verdict is not technical, it is judicial. Management failed the crew. The paperwork is the confession. Every actor is named. The foreman flagged the staybolt, the dispatcher issued the order. The maintenance manager deferred the repair. The NTSB lead signed the conclusion. The record is not a mystery, it is a ledger of decisions, each one a step toward uncontained mechanical failure. The steel did not choose to fail, the spreadsheet did. The verdict stands. The crew paid with their lives. Management paid with a footnote in the docket. A locomotive boiler does not self-destruct. It is sabotaged by ignored fusible plugs, corroded staybolts, and a superintendent's signature on a deferred inspection. Today's pressure vessels run hotter under tighter margins. The tensile yield limit is not a suggestion. It is the last line between the crew and catastrophe. Every shortcut signed in ink translates to superheated steam and uncontained mechanical failure. Railroads write the paperwork. Workers pay the price. Drop your thoughts below.